The words crackled through the radio like broken glass. "Send her away or we're all dead." Commander Holden Pierce's voice cut through the operations tent, sharp enough to draw blood. 8 Navy SEALs turned as one, their eyes finding the figure standing in the doorway. She was small, young, and according to every man in that room, she had no business breathing the same air as them. But in 6 hours, the man pointing at her would be bleeding out in a valley, begging God for a miracle. And that miracle would come from the girl they wanted to throw away. If you want to see how one shot changed everything, stay with this story to the very end. 6 hours earlier, the helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Sentinel at exactly 0347 hours. The rotors beat against the desert air, throwing sand and dust in every direction, painting the pre-dawn darkness with shadows that moved like living things. Ilara Mackenzie stepped onto Nevada soil for the first time in 3 years. 28 years old, 5 feet 6 inches. Auburn hair pulled into a regulation bun so tight it made her temples ache. Gray eyes that held a stillness most people spent lifetimes trying to find. She carried orders that would make very powerful men very angry, and a rifle case that cost more than most soldiers made in a year. The crew chief grabbed her arm before she could walk away from the bird. He had to shout over the rotors, his voice nearly lost in the noise. "Hey, you sure you're in the right place?" Elle looked at him. Her eyes held something that made him release her arm without understanding why. It wasn't anger, it wasn't threat, it was just stillness. Complete and total stillness. "I'm sure," she said. She walked toward the operations center, boots crunching on gravel. Behind her, the helicopter lifted off, rotors fading into the distance, leaving her alone in a place that didn't want her. Soldiers stopped mid-task to watch her pass. A woman, here, in the middle of nowhere, attached to a SEAL team that hadn't requested her, didn't want her, and had no idea what to do with her. This was going to be interesting. Inside the operations tent, Commander Holden Pierce was having the worst week of his career, and it had just gotten worse. "What do you mean she's assigned to us?" He held the orders like they were written in a language he didn't speak. His jaw worked. His eyes scanned the paper again and again, looking for the part that made sense. Lieutenant Ava Sterling stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. Her blonde hair was pulled back, her face showing the exhaustion that came from too many missions and not enough sleep. "Orders are signed by someone with stars on their collar, Holden," she said quietly. "This isn't a joke. She's barely out of her 20s. She's 28. That's not a child." Pierce threw the orders onto the table hard enough to make the laminated surface rattle. His team had trained for months for the upcoming operation. Every variable accounted for, every contingency planned. And now this. "Technical specialist," he said, voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "What's she going to do? Fix our laptops?" The tent flap opened. Elle walked in. The room went silent. 8 operators, the most elite warriors America produced. They stared at her like she'd materialized from another dimension. Pierce recovered first. "You're Mackenzie?" "Yes, sir." "You understand this is an active combat zone?" Elle's expression didn't change. "That's why I'm here, sir." Senior Chief Rowan Thorne laughed from his position near the tactical display. He was 38 years old, the team's primary sniper, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then left out in the weather too long. "This is precious," he said. His voice dripped contempt. "Absolutely precious. Did someone lose a bet? Is this a morale thing? Because I've got to say, sending us a mascot is really going to boost our spirits." Elle turned to face him. Her expression still didn't change. It was like looking at still water. "I'm not a mascot, Senior Chief." "No?" Thorne pushed off from the display table, crossing his arms. "Then what are you? Some kind of secret weapon? The Pentagon's new diversity initiative? Someone who's going to save your life before this week is over." The silence that followed was absolute. Thorne's smile faded. His eyes went hard. When he spoke again, his voice could have cut steel. "Little girl, I've been doing this job since before you were born. I've forgotten more about combat than you'll ever learn. So maybe show some respect before you start making promises you can't keep." Elle's voice stayed quiet, calm, like she was discussing the weather. "Respect is earned. So is doubt. You haven't earned either from me yet." Pierce stepped between them before Thorne could respond. His hand went up, palm out, the universal signal for stop. "Enough." He turned to Elle. "Mackenzie, you're dismissed. Find quarters. Stay out of the way. We'll figure out what to do with you tomorrow." "Sir, my orders authorize me for—" "I don't care what your orders authorize." Pierce's voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. "My team. My rules. Dismissed." Elle held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once, turned, and walked out. Behind her, she heard Thorne mutter just loud enough to carry, "Someone needs to send that kid home before she gets herself killed." Petty Officer First Class Beckett Walsh found her an hour later. She was sitting alone outside the mess hall, cleaning a rifle that made him stop in his tracks. He'd been in the Navy for 10 years. He knew weapons, and what she was holding wasn't standard issue. "That's an MK-13 Mod 7, he said. Elle didn't look up. Her hands moved with practiced precision, breaking down the weapon, wiping each component, reassembling it without looking. "Yes, that's a precision sniper system. I know what it is." Walsh moved closer. He was 28, same age as Elle, with dark hair and the kind of face that looked like it smiled easily. Right now, he wasn't smiling. He was studying the weapon with the eyes of someone who understood what he was seeing. "That's not standard issue," he said. "That's custom. The barrel, the stock, the optics." He whistled low. "Someone spent serious money on this." "My father." Walsh blinked. "Your father gave you a $50,000 sniper rifle." "He gave me a lot of things." Elle's hands never stopped moving. Shooting was just one of them. Walsh sat down across from her. The concrete was still warm from the day's heat, radiating through his fatigues. Above them, stars were starting to appear, sharp and clear in the desert sky. "You're not what they think you are," he said quietly. "Are you?" Elle finally looked at him. Her gray eyes caught the light from the mess hall, turning them silver. "What do they think I am?" "A kid. Someone's daughter who pulled strings to play soldier. A liability waiting to happen." "And what do you think?" Walsh studied her for a long moment. The way she held the rifle, even at rest. The way her eyes tracked movement at the edges of her vision, even while they talked. The way she breathed, slow, controlled, deliberate. "I think you're something they've never seen before," he said, "and that scares them more than they'll admit." Elle went back to her rifle, but the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me since I got here." The next morning, Rowan Thorne decided to make an example of her. "Range qualification," he announced at breakfast, loud enough for everyone to hear. The mess hall went quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. "If the technical specialist is going to be on my base, she needs to prove she can at least hold a weapon without shooting herself." Elle set down her coffee. The cup made a soft sound against the metal table. "Fine," Thorne grinned. It wasn't a nice expression. "That's it? No protests? No excuses?" "Why would I protest?" Elle stood. "I've been waiting for someone to give me permission to shoot." 40 minutes later, most of the base had gathered at the firing range. Word spread fast in places like this. The new arrival was going to embarrass herself. Nobody wanted to miss it. Soldiers lined the observation area, some sitting on vehicles, others standing with arms crossed, all of them waiting for the show. Thorne handed Elle a standard M4 carbine. "Let's start simple," he said. "Targets at 200 meters, 3 rounds. Try not to miss completely." Elle looked at the weapon, then back at Thorne. "Permission to use my own equipment, Senior Chief." Thorne's smile flickered, just for a second. Then it came back, wider than before. Your own? He laughed. Sure, sweetheart. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Elle walked to her case, opened it, withdrew the MK-13 that Walsh had admired the night before. The laughter died. She set up on the firing line. Her movements were economical, practiced. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, just assembled the rifle with the kind of muscle memory that came from doing something 10,000 times. The range master called out, "First target, 500 meters." 500. That was standard qualification distance for designated marksmen, beyond what most soldiers could hit consistently. Thorne had started her at 200 with an M4. Now she was shooting 500 with a long-range platform. Elle settled into position. Her breathing slowed. Her body went still. She fired 3 times. The spotter looked through his magnification scope for a long moment. Then he turned around, face pale. 3 rounds, same hole. The range went quiet. 700 meters, Thorne said. His voice had gone flat. Elle adjusted, fired 3 more times. Same hole. 900, 3 rounds. 1 ragged hole that could be covered by a quarter. 1,100 meters. The wind had picked up. Elle could feel it on her face, read it in the way the heat shimmer moved across the desert. 1,100 meters. Light crosswind. Mirage making the target dance. She made final adjustments, each movement precise. Controlled her breathing. Squeezed the trigger 3 times. The spotter looked for longer this time. When he turned around, his voice cracked. 3 rounds, same hole. I can't tell them apart without walking down there. Thorne stared at the distant target. 1,100 meters. In light crosswind. With a rifle she just picked up. 3 rounds that could be covered by a single coin. Who the hell are you? He whispered. Elle began breaking down her rifle. Her voice was quieter than the desert wind. Someone who doesn't miss, Senior Chief. She looked at him. Someone who never misses. That night, Lieutenant Ava Sterling couldn't sleep. She sat in the intelligence office, the glow of computer monitors painting her face blue-white in the darkness. Around her, the base was quiet. Most personnel were asleep. In a few hours, the sun would rise and everything would start again. But Ava couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen at the range. Elle Mackenzie's name kept pulling at her, like a splinter under the skin. So she did what intelligence officers did. She started digging. Most of it came back redacted. Black bars covering everything except basic biographical data. No training records, no unit assignments, no explanation for how a 28-year-old woman could shoot like a special operations veteran with decades of experience. But there was one note, one small annotation buried in the classification codes. JSOC, authorization required. Mackenzie Protocol. Ava had never heard of a Mackenzie Protocol. She'd never seen clearance requirements this strict for someone so young. Whatever Elle really was, someone very powerful wanted it kept secret. She pulled up family records. Father, Garrett Mackenzie. Occupation, military rank. Ava's hands went cold. That shouldn't be possible. Ranks weren't classified, not unless the rank was high enough that knowing it would reveal too much. Not unless. She typed another query, waited while the system processed, and then the answer came back. Partial clearance granted, just enough to see. Admiral Garrett Mackenzie, Commander, Naval Special Warfare. Ava sat back in her chair like she'd been hit. The Admiral, the legend, the man who'd written half the tactical doctrine that special operations use today. The man who'd trained more elite warriors than anyone else in military history. And Elle was his daughter. Elle found Ava in the intelligence office an hour before dawn. The sky outside was starting to turn gray, that pale light that comes before sunrise, when the world is caught between darkness and day. You've been researching me, Elle said. It wasn't a question. Ava didn't deny it. Someone has to know who you really are. Why? Because in 48 hours, my people are going into hostile territory. Ava turned to face her fully. And I need to know if you're an asset or a liability. Elle moved closer. In the dim light of the monitors, her eyes seemed older than her face. Older than 28. Older than they should be. What did you find? Nothing. Everything's classified. Locked behind walls I don't have clearance to breach. Ava paused. But I know how to read between the lines. Your father isn't just military. He's someone important. Someone who trained you personally. Someone who gave you skills that shouldn't exist in someone your age. Does it matter who he is? It might matter why you're here. Ava leaned forward. Why are you here, Elle? Really? This isn't a training exercise. This isn't some field trip to pad your resume. Men are going to die on this mission. Maybe a lot of men. Why would anyone send a 28-year-old into that? Elle was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone is going to betray you. Someone you trust. And I'm here to stop them. The mission briefing happened at 1400 hours. Pierce stood at the front of the room, tactical displays showing satellite imagery of a compound deep in enemy territory. The structure sat in a valley, surrounded by mountains, accessible only by narrow roads that wound through terrain perfect for ambushes. Target is a warlord named Malik Hassan, Pierce said. His voice was professional, detached. The voice of a man who'd given 100 briefings just like this one. He's responsible for 6 attacks on coalition forces in the last 3 months. Intelligence confirms he's meeting with arms dealers tomorrow night. We insert by helicopter, approach on foot, eliminate the target, and extract. Thorne raised his hand. What about the intelligence source? How reliable is this? Source is classified, but command considers it solid. We've been tracking Hassan's movements for weeks. This is the best opportunity we're going to get. Elle stood near the back of the room. She'd been studying the intelligence package for the past hour, and something about it bothered her. The information was too clean, too perfect, like someone wanted them to find it. Sir, she said. Every head turned. Pierce's jaw tightened. Mackenzie, this is a command briefing. I understand, sir, but I have concerns about the intelligence. Thorne snorted. Of course you do. The technical specialist has concerns about intelligence gathered by professionals with decades of experience. Elle ignored him. She stepped forward, moving to the tactical display, her finger tracing routes on the projected map. The compound layout, the guard rotations, the timing of the meeting. She looked at Pierce. It's too convenient. It reads like someone constructed it specifically for us to find. And you know this how? Pierce demanded. Because I've seen this pattern before. In training simulations designed to identify ambush scenarios. She met his eyes. This is a trap, Commander. Someone wants you to walk into that compound. The room erupted. Operators shouting over each other, some defending the intelligence, others demanding to know how a 28-year-old thought she knew better than their analysts. Pierce raised his hand for silence. When it came, his voice was ice. Mackenzie, you're dismissed from this briefing and from this mission. You will remain on base tomorrow night. That's an order. Sir, that's an order. Elle looked around the room, at the men who would be walking into that compound, at Walsh, whose face showed he believed her, at Thorne, whose contempt had only deepened. I hope I'm wrong, she said quietly. For all your sakes, I hope I'm wrong. She walked out. Behind her, Pierce turned back to his team. The mission proceeds as planned. We launch at 2200 hours tomorrow. Walsh found her at the vehicle depot 2 hours later. She was standing alone, staring at a line of Humvees like she was memorizing them. You really believe it's a trap? He asked. I know it is. How? Elle turned to face him. The afternoon sun caught her hair, turning the auburn strands copper. Because I've spent my entire life being trained to recognize them. My father, she paused, he's not just military, Beckett. He designed half the tactical doctrine that Special Operations uses today. He's been preparing me for moments exactly like this since I was 5 years old. Why would someone set up an ambush? That's what I don't know yet, but someone with access to classified intelligence fed you that information. Someone who wants this team dead. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Above them, a jet passed overhead, contrail cutting white across the blue sky. If you're right, he said slowly, and they walk into an ambush tomorrow night, they'll be outnumbered, outgunned. No air support because the terrain makes extraction impossible. Elle's voice was flat, mechanical, running through scenarios she'd already calculated 100 times. Casualties will be total or near total within the first 15 minutes. We have to tell Commander Pierce. He won't listen to me. You saw what happened in the briefing. Then I'll tell him. He won't listen to you either. Elle's eyes found his. But when everything goes wrong tomorrow night, I need you to remember this conversation. Because I'm going to do something that will probably end my career, and I need at least one person to understand why. That night, Elle sat in her quarters and wrote a letter. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but she needed to put the words down, needed to make them real. Dad, tomorrow, something bad is going to happen. I've tried to warn them, but they won't listen. They see a young woman. They see someone who doesn't belong. They can't see past their own assumptions to recognize the truth. You always told me that the hardest part of being exceptional isn't the training or the sacrifice. It's being underestimated by everyone around you. It's knowing you can help and being told to stand down. I'm not going to stand down, Dad. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm going to do what you trained me to do. I'm going to save them, even if they don't want to be saved. Mom used to say that stillness was the greatest gift. I understand now what she meant. When everyone else is moving, panicking, reacting, that's when stillness becomes power. I carry both of you with me. Her gift, your training. Together they made me into something that can do the impossible. Love, Elle. She sealed the letter, placed it under her pillow. Then she checked her rifle one final time, made sure her pack was ready, and lay down to wait. To wait for the moment when everything would change. The helicopters lifted off at 2200 hours exactly. Elle watched from the edge of the landing pad as the birds disappeared into the darkness. She could see them for a few seconds, running lights blinking, and then they were gone, swallowed by the night. The sound of rotors faded, and was gone. Thorne's words from the briefing echoed in her mind. The mission proceeds as planned. Elle waited. She counted to 300. 5 minutes, giving them time to get far enough away that no one would see what happened next. Then she walked to the motor pool. The night guard was a young corporal named Flynn Archer, 23 years old, fresh-faced, still believed in following orders without question. He looked up from his post as Elle approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Elle reached into her pocket, withdrew something she'd never shown anyone. A credential with a seal that made Flynn's face go pale, even in the darkness. The seal of the Joint Special Operations Command, with Admiral Garrett Mackenzie's signature. "I need a vehicle," Elle said. Her voice was quiet, calm. The voice of someone who expected to be obeyed. "Fast and quiet, and I need you to forget I was ever here." Flynn stared at the credential, at the name, at the authorization level that shouldn't exist for someone so young. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. "Whatever you need." The road north was treacherous in darkness. Elle drove without lights, using night vision, pushing the Humvee as fast as the terrain allowed. The mountains rose around her like jagged teeth against the stars. 40 kilometers to the target compound. 90 minutes if she pushed hard, if the roads held, if nothing went wrong. Her radio crackled. The team's frequency. She'd memorized it during the briefing, even though she wasn't supposed to have access. Pierce's voice came through, distorted by distance and interference. "Viper team approaching objective. All elements report ready." The responses came one by one. Thorne, Walsh, the others, all confirming, all moving into position. Elle pressed the accelerator harder. At the compound, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Thorne thought it, even as he moved through the shadows. Intelligence said light security. Intelligence said easy access. Intelligence said in and out in 30 minutes. But his gut said something else. The breach went smoothly, walls scaled, guards neutralized with suppressed weapons, entry points secured. They moved through the outer buildings in standard formation, weapons up, covering every angle. Empty. All of it empty. "Something's wrong," Walsh whispered into his mic. Thorne's hand went to his throat mic. "Command, target building is clear. No sign of Hassan. No sign of anyone." Before Pierce could respond, the night exploded. Muzzle flashes from every direction. Explosions ripping through the compound. Screaming in languages they didn't need to understand to know what they meant. Elle was still 20 kilometers out when she heard it on the radio. "Ambush! We are under fire! Multiple hostiles! All directions!" Thorne's voice, stripped of its earlier arrogance, now just raw and desperate. "Two wounded! We're pinned! Fall back to secondary position! Move! Move!" And then the words that made Elle's blood freeze. They knew we were coming. They knew exactly where we'd be. Elle drove faster. The radio traffic became increasingly desperate, casualties mounting, ammunition running low, no extraction possible. Enemy positions controlled all approach routes. Walsh's voice, strained but steady. "Commander, we need support. Anything. Everything." Pierce's response was barely audible over the gunfire. "Air assets can't reach us. There's a SAM position on the eastern ridge. Nothing's getting through." Elle checked her map. The eastern ridge. She'd studied it on the satellite imagery. 3,218 meters from the compound. Elevated. Clear sight lines. 3,218 meters at night. With wind. With a target she could barely see. Impossible. But impossible was what her father had trained her for. She abandoned the Humvee at the base of a ridge system 8 kilometers from the compound. From here she would move on foot, through terrain the enemy wasn't watching, up paths that shouldn't exist. Her pack held the essentials: rifle, ammunition, water, first aid, nothing else. She began to climb. Above her the sounds of battle continued. Gunfire, explosions, men screaming. Below her the darkness stretched forever, and somewhere between them 8 men were dying. Unless she reached them first. The climb was brutal. Elle's lungs burned as she pushed upward through terrain that seemed designed to kill anyone stupid enough to attempt it. Loose rocks shifted beneath her boots with every step. Thorny brush tore at her hands, leaving trails of blood she couldn't stop to treat. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest she couldn't afford to give. On the radio, the situation was deteriorating by the minute. "Thorne's hit!" Walsh's voice crackled through static, high and tight with fear. "Femoral artery. I'm applying tourniquet, but he's losing blood fast." Pierce responded, his words punctuated by the staccato bark of gunfire. "How long can he hold?" "Maybe an hour, maybe less. We need evac now. Air can't reach us. That SAM is still active." Elle climbed faster. The goat trail she'd identified on the map was steeper than satellite imagery suggested. In daylight, with proper equipment, it would have been challenging. At night, alone, with enemy fighters potentially anywhere, it was suicide. She didn't care. 8 men were dying. 8 men who had dismissed her, mocked her, told her she didn't belong. 8 men who would be dead by sunrise if she didn't do something impossible. Her father's voice echoed through her exhaustion, words spoken 1,000 times during training sessions that pushed her past what she thought were her limits. "Pain is temporary, Elle. Failure is permanent. Which one can you live with?" She kept climbing. 30 minutes into the ascent, her hand closed on empty air where rocks should have been. The edge crumbled beneath her fingers. She slipped, sliding backward, boots scrambling for purchase on loose scree. Her pack caught on something, jerking her to a stop, and then that gave way too. She was falling. Her hands shot out, desperate, grabbing at anything solid. Her fingers found a root, held. Her body swung out over darkness, shoulders screaming with the strain of supporting her full weight plus gear. For a long moment she hung there. Below her, nothing but black. A fall that would kill her before she hit bottom. Above her, more climbing, more pain. And somewhere beyond the ridge, men dying. Elle looked down into the abyss. It would be so easy to let go, to fall, to let someone else be the hero. But then she heard it. Thorne's voice on the radio, weak now, fading. "Tell my daughter Bryn, tell her daddy tried." Elle pulled herself up, one arm, then the other, dragging her body onto stable ground through pure determination. She allowed herself 3 breaths, just 3. Then she stood and continued climbing. The radio crackled again. This time it was a voice she didn't recognize. One of the wounded operators, speaking through gritted teeth, each word costing him. "Tell my wife I love her. Tell her I'm sorry." "Shut up," Pierce cut in, and for the first time Elle heard desperation beneath his command voice. "Nobody's dying tonight, you hear me? Nobody." But Elle could hear the lie in his words. The commander was running out of options, running out of time, running out of hope. She was 40 minutes from the ridge, 40 minutes from a shot that might save them all. If they lasted that long, the enemy knew they had the SEALs trapped. Elle could hear it in the radio traffic she was intercepting on secondary frequencies. They were taking their time, tightening the noose, enjoying the slow death of America's finest warriors. "We should rush them," one of the operators said, voice raw with desperation. "Break through to the east." "Negative," Pierce responded. "That sniper on the ridge will cut us down before we make 50 meters. We tried that approach. Lawson took a round in the shoulder." "Then what? We just sit here and wait to die?" "We wait for a miracle." Elle's jaw tightened. She was the miracle. She just had to get there in time. 20 minutes later, she reached a plateau. The terrain opened up, giving her her first clear view of the valley spread out below. It looked like hell had opened its mouth. Muzzle flashes everywhere, tracers cutting through darkness like angry red lines drawn by a mad artist. And at the center, a cluster of rocks where the SEALs had made their final stand. They were surrounded on 3 sides. The 4th side was a cliff face. No escape, no reinforcement. Just 8 men against what looked like 40 or 50 enemy fighters. Elle scanned the ridge across the valley. There, the SAM position. She could see the launcher, silhouetted against the stars. And beside it, a figure. The operator who was keeping rescue helicopters away. 3,218 meters across a valley filled with swirling mountain wind. At night, with a target she could barely see. Her father had made her take shots like this in training, hundreds of times, thousands. But training wasn't combat. Targets didn't shoot back, and failure in training meant embarrassment, not death. She found a position, stable, clear sightline. She began setting up her rifle. On the radio, Walsh's voice cut through. "Thorne's crashing. His pulse is thready. We're losing him." Pierce's voice cracked for the first time, raw, human. "Stay with me, Senior Chief. That's an order. You don't have permission to die." Thorne's response was barely audible. Each word seemed to cost him everything he had left. Tell that kid. I was wrong about her. Tell her yourself. You're going to make it." Elle's hands were steady as she adjusted her scope. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped to 50 beats per minute. The trained response of a sniper preparing to take a life. But her eyes burned. Thorne, the man who had mocked her, who had called her a mascot, who had done everything possible to humiliate her from the moment she arrived. He was asking forgiveness. In what he thought were his final moments, he was thinking about the girl he'd dismissed. "I'm coming," Elle whispered to the darkness. "Just hold on. I'm coming." She finished her calculations. Windage, elevation, the curve of the bullet over 3,218 meters. At this range, she wasn't aiming at what she could see. She was aiming at where mathematics said the target would be when the bullet arrived. 3.8 seconds of flight time, 40 meters of drop, 12 meters of wind drift, a target the size of a dinner plate at a distance most shooters couldn't even see. One shot. Everything depended on one shot. She keyed her radio. The frequency was supposed to be secure, but she'd memorized it from the briefing. Viper Command, this is Mackenzie. I have eyes on the SAM position. 3,218 meters. I can take the shot. Silence. Then Pierce's voice. Disbelief and fury mixed together. Mackenzie, what the hell are you? 3,218 meters, Commander. Night conditions. Crosswind. I can make this shot. That's impossible. Nobody can. I can. Her voice was calm. Certain. The voice of someone who had never missed. Give me permission to fire. Another silence. Longer this time. She could imagine Pierce processing what he was hearing. The 28-year-old girl he dismissed was somehow on a ridge above the battlefield, offering to take a shot that his best snipers couldn't make. If you miss, Pierce said quietly, they'll see your muzzle flash. They'll know exactly where you are. I know. You'll be hunted, alone, with no support. I know. Mackenzie, Pierce's voice dropped even lower. Why are you doing this? Elle's finger rested on the trigger guard. The world was narrowing, focusing, becoming just her and the target in the space between them. Because you didn't listen when I told you it was a trap. Because Thorne is dying. Because Walsh has people who need him to come home. She paused. Because this is what I was born to do. The wind shifted. Elle adjusted her aim fractionally. A quarter inch at the rifle became meters at the target. Take the shot, Pierce said quietly. And Mackenzie, thank you. Elle exhaled halfway. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. The SAM operator, 3,218 meters away, completely unaware that death was about to arrive from across a valley. She listened to the wind, not with her ears, with something deeper, some part of her that her father had trained to hear what others couldn't. The wind had a sound, a frequency, 48 hertz. She could feel it in her bones. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder. 1 second. Her scope showed the same position. The operator still sitting, still alive. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The operator jerked, slumped forward, didn't move again. Sam is down! Lieutenant Ava Sterling's voice exploded through the radio from base. She'd been watching on drone feeds, helpless until now. Air assets, you are cleared for approach. Repeat, cleared for approach. But Elle was already moving. Her muzzle flash had given her away. She could hear shouts in the valley below. Enemy fighters pointing toward her position. Redirecting. They were coming. She broke down her rifle in seconds, packed it, began moving along the ridge, staying low, using the terrain for cover. Behind her, she heard the first shots, rounds cracking against rock where she'd been seconds before. Mackenzie, we're tracking multiple hostiles converging on your last position. Ava's voice was tight with fear. You need to move. Already moving. Extraction birds are 5 minutes out. Can you reach the valley? 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, she needed to cross a kilometer of hostile terrain, evade search teams that were actively hunting her, and reach an extraction point that was currently under enemy control. Elle ran. The ridge was narrow, forcing her into a channel of rock that limited her options. She could hear voices behind her, closing. They were fast, and they knew this terrain better than she did. She rounded a boulder and came face to face with an enemy fighter. He was young, maybe her age, maybe younger, eyes wide with surprise in the moonlight. For a heartbeat, they both froze. Two people who should never have met. Two lives intersecting at the worst possible moment. Then his hand moved toward his weapon. Elle was faster. Years of close combat training took over. Muscle memory built through thousands of repetitions. She deflected his rifle with her left hand, drove her right palm into his nose, felt cartilage crunch. Before he could recover, she swept his legs, dropped him to the ground, applied a chokehold her father had taught her when she was 12. He struggled, clawed at her arms. His movements grew weaker. Weaker. He went limp. Elle released him, checked his pulse. Alive. Unconscious. She'd spared his life because she could afford to. Because killing wasn't the point. Surviving was. She kept running. The valley floor was chaos. Helicopters were approaching from the west, their rotors a thunderous heartbeat of hope. The enemy fighters were caught between attacking the SEALs and defending against the incoming air support. Viper team, extraction birds are 30 seconds out. Ava's voice was steadier now. Move to Rally Point Alpha, Pierce responded through labored breathing. We're moving. Thorne's being carried. Lawson is mobile but wounded. We need covering fire. Air support is engaging now. Elle reached the edge of the ridge. Below her, 300 meters of steep descent. Beyond that, the valley floor where the SEALs were making their desperate push toward extraction. She could see them now, figures moving through darkness, some supporting others, all of them heading for a clearing where the helicopters would land. She could also see the problem. A group of enemy fighters had positioned themselves between the SEALs and the landing zone, dug in, waiting. When the team tried to cross that final stretch, they'd be cut down. The helicopter gunners couldn't see the position. The angle was wrong. The fighters were concealed behind rocks that blocked the view from above. But Elle could see them. She unslung her rifle, set up on the ridge, 400 meters to the enemy position. Not ideal, but manageable. Viper Command, you have hostiles dug in between you and extraction. 4 shooters, concealed position, bearing 035 from your current location. Pierce's response was immediate. Can you deal with them? Already on it, she fired. A fighter dropped. She relocated, understanding that staying in one position meant death. Fired again, another one down. The remaining 2 figured out what was happening. One of them turned, trying to identify her position. She put a round through his chest before he could fire. The 4th fighter ran. She let him go. He wasn't a threat anymore. Path is clear, she transmitted. Move now. The SEALs surged forward, Walsh half carrying Thorne, whose face was gray with blood loss. Pierce supporting Lawson. The others covering their movement with what little ammunition they had left. The helicopters touched down in the clearing, door gunners laying suppressive fire in all directions, creating a wall of lead between the team and anyone who wanted to stop them. The team piled in, wounded first, then the others, loading with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Mackenzie, where are you? Pierce's voice was urgent. Get to the extraction point. Elle was already moving, sliding down the ridge, using controlled falls to cover distance faster than running would allow. She could see the helicopter, rotors spinning, ready to lift off. 400 meters, 300, rounds cracked past her. The enemy had regrouped. They could see her now, exposed on the slope, and they were determined to make her pay for every life she'd taken tonight. 200 meters. Her legs burned. Her lungs screamed. A round tugged at her sleeve, drawing a line of fire across her arm. 100 meters. The helicopter's door gunner saw her, shifted fire to cover her approach. Tracers reached out, forcing the enemy to take cover. 50 meters. Elle sprinted with everything she had left, every reserve of energy, every ounce of determination. The helicopter was lifting, beginning to climb, but the crew chief was reaching for her, hand extended. She jumped. His hand caught her wrist. For a moment she hung suspended, legs dangling over darkness, the ground falling away beneath her. And then he pulled. Other hands grabbed her, and she was inside, collapsing on the deck plates, gasping for air she couldn't seem to find. The helicopter climbed, tilted, accelerated away from the valley. She was alive. They were all alive. Thorne was unconscious on a stretcher. Medics already working on his leg, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Walsh sat beside him, holding the senior chief's hand like he could anchor him to life through sheer will. Lawson was being bandaged. The others looked like men who'd seen death and barely escaped. Their faces were streaked with sweat and blood. Their eyes held that 1,000-yard stare that came from combat that went too close. Pierce moved to where Elle lay on the floor. His face was covered with grime. Blood from a wound she hadn't noticed before ran down his temple. He stared at her for a long moment, just stared, like he was trying to reconcile what he'd seen with what he'd believed. "That shot," he said finally. His voice was hoarse. 3,218 meters, at night, with wind. He shook his head slowly. "That's the most impressive thing I've seen in 20 years of combat operations." Elle couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting her hard. But she managed to lift her hand, reached into her shirt, pulled out her dog tags. Pierce took them, read them, and his face changed. Went through shock, understanding, and something that might have been shame, all in the span of 3 seconds. "Mackenzie," he read aloud. "Ilara R." His eyes found hers. "Daughter of Admiral Garrett Mackenzie, Commander, Naval Special Warfare." Walsh's head snapped up from where he sat with Thorne. The other operators who were conscious went still. The ones who weren't too far gone in their own pain and exhaustion turned to look. Admiral Mackenzie, the legend, the man who had written the book on special operations, the man who had trained more elite warriors than anyone else in military history, the man whose name was spoken with reverence in every SEAL team, every special operations unit, every place where warriors gathered. And this was his daughter. "He trained you," Pierce said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Understanding blooming across his face. "Your whole life. He made you into this." Elle nodded weakly. Her voice came out as a rasp. "Since I was 5. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me?" Elle's eyes met his. "Or would you have thought I was just riding my father's reputation, using his name to get respect I hadn't earned?" Pierce was silent. They both knew the answer. "I tried to warn you," Elle continued, her voice strengthening slightly, "about the intelligence, about the trap, but you couldn't see past what you thought I was. A kid, a liability, someone who didn't belong." Pierce closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. Some fundamental shift in how he saw the world. "I was wrong," he said. The words seemed to cost him. "We all were." He handed back her dog tags. "You saved 8 lives tonight, Mackenzie, including mine. I won't forget that." Elle tucked the tags back inside her shirt. "Then maybe next time you'll listen when someone tells you something's wrong, even if that someone is a 28-year-old woman." "Especially if," Pierce said. The helicopter flew on through the darkness, carrying its cargo of survivors toward the distant lights of the base. But Elle wasn't thinking about the base. She was thinking about what she'd heard on the radio during the ambush. The way the enemy had known exactly where to find them. The way the trap had been perfectly constructed. Someone had betrayed them. Someone with access to classified intelligence. Someone who had almost gotten 8 men killed tonight, and Elle intended to find out who. The helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Sentinel at 0412 hours. Medical teams rushed the aircraft before the rotors stopped spinning. Elle watched from the deck as they loaded Thorne onto a stretcher. His face was gray, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were open. "Hang in there, Senior Chief," Walsh said, gripping Thorne's hand one final time before the medics pulled him away. "You're too mean to die." Thorne's eyes fluttered, found Walsh, then found Elle. Something passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, a wordless apology for every cruel thing he'd said. Then they were running with him toward the surgical unit, and he was gone. Pierce stood beside Elle as the chaos swirled around them. Wounded being triaged, reports being shouted, officers demanding explanations for what had gone so catastrophically wrong. "You need medical attention," Pierce said, nodding at her arm. Blood had soaked through her sleeve. The wound was still bleeding sluggishly. Later, Elle's eyes tracked the base personnel rushing back and forth. Her mind was already working, already analyzing. "We need to find out who did this. The intelligence failure, that's for the investigators." "Not investigators." Elle turned to face him. "Me." Pierce's jaw tightened. "You're suggesting we have a traitor." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you." She lowered her voice. "The enemy knew exactly where you'd be. They knew your approach routes. They knew your extraction options. That level of detail doesn't come from lucky guessing. It comes from someone who had access to your operational planning. That's a serious accusation. 8 men almost died tonight. That's serious." Elle met his eyes. "I need to see the intelligence chain of custody. Every person who touched that package from source to distribution. That information is classified." "Commander," Elle's voice hardened, "my father is Admiral Garrett Mackenzie. I have clearance levels you don't even know exist. Either you help me find the traitor, or I go over your head so fast you'll feel the breeze." Pierce stared at her. This wasn't the quiet girl who'd arrived 2 days ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone who had been forged in fire and emerged as steel. "Follow me," he said. Lieutenant Ava Sterling was already in the intelligence office when they arrived. She looked up from her terminal. Her face was pale with exhaustion and something darker. "I've been going through the source data," she said without preamble. Elle was right. The intelligence was constructed, fabricated. Someone planted it specifically for us to find. "Who?" Pierce demanded. "That's what I'm trying to determine." Ava pulled up a screen. Lines of code, access logs, digital fingerprints. The initial report came from a paid informant. Handler was a contractor named David Morgan. But when I checked Morgan's access logs, she paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "What?" Elle stepped closer. Morgan's credentials were used to upload the intelligence, but the access originated from a secure facility in Germany. Morgan hasn't left Afghanistan in 6 months. "Someone spoofed his credentials," Elle said. "Used them remotely to plant the false intelligence." "That would require significant technical expertise," Ava said, "and detailed knowledge of our security protocols. Who has that kind of access?" Ava hesitated. Her eyes flickered to Pierce, then back to Elle. "A handful of people, all vetted, all trusted." "Names," Elle said. Her voice was ice. Ava took a breath, then she started typing. "There are 4 people with the technical capability and access level required. 2 are currently deployed to other theaters. 1 is on leave in the States." She paused again. "The 4th is here, on this base." "Who?" The name appeared on the screen. Elle read it twice to make sure she wasn't mistaken. "Major Dalton Crane, Intelligence Liaison. 15 years of service, decorated, trusted." "Crane?" Pierce's voice was hollow, empty. "I've known him for 8 years. He was at my wedding. He's godfather to my son." "Then he's been lying to you for 8 years, Elle said. She was already moving toward the door. "Where is he?" "Elle, wait." Ava stood. "We need to do this properly. Chain of evidence. Interrogation protocols. If Crane is really the traitor, we need to build a case that will hold up. And if he runs while we're building our case?" "He won't run. He doesn't know we're onto him." Elle stopped, turned. "You're sure about that?" Ava opened her mouth to respond. Then her terminal beeped. An alert. She looked at it and her face went white. "What?" Pierce moved to her side. "Crane just logged into the system." Ava's fingers flew across the keyboard. He's deleting files, access logs, communication records." Her voice rose. "He knows. Somehow he knows." Elle was out the door before either of them could react. Crane's quarters were on the far side of the base. Elle ran, ignoring the pain in her arm, ignoring the exhaustion that threatened to pull her down. She'd been awake for over 24 hours. She'd climbed a mountain, taken impossible shots, fought hand to hand, survived an extraction that should have killed her. None of that mattered. She reached Crane's building and found the door to his quarters standing open. Inside, a half-packed bag sat on the bed, drawers pulled open, closet emptied. He was already gone. Elle keyed her radio. Crane has fled his quarters. Packed bag, open door. He's running. Ava responded immediately. I'm tracking his access card. He's at the motor pool. He's taking a vehicle. Elle sprinted again. The motor pool was 200 meters away. She covered the distance in under a minute, lungs burning, legs threatening to give out. She rounded the corner just in time to see a Humvee pulling out. Crane behind the wheel. Their eyes met through the windshield. For a single instant, everything stopped. The traitor and the girl who'd survived his trap. The man who had sold out his brothers and the 28-year-old who had saved them. Then Crane floored the accelerator. Elle didn't think. She drew her sidearm and fired. Not at Crane, at the tires. One shot. Two. The front right tire exploded in a spray of rubber. The Humvee swerved, fishtailed, and slammed into a concrete barrier. Elle was on him before he could recover. She yanked open the driver's door, grabbed Crane by his collar, threw him onto the ground with strength born from fury and adrenaline. Don't move! Her weapon was aimed at his face. Don't breathe without permission. Crane stared up at her. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the steering wheel. His eyes were wild with fear. You don't understand, he said. They made me do it. They have my family. Your family? Elle's voice was flat, cold. You sold out 8 men because of your family? My wife, my children. They said they'd kill them if I didn't cooperate. So you decided to kill us instead. I didn't have a choice. Elle crouched beside him. Her weapon never wavered. There's always a choice, Major. You could have reported the threat. You could have asked for protection. You could have done literally anything except send good men to die. You don't know what it's like, Crane's voice cracked. Watching your children grow up, knowing someone could take them away at any moment, knowing that every day you don't cooperate might be the day they disappear. You're right, I don't know what that's like. Elle leaned closer. But I know what it's like to run toward a battle I wasn't supposed to be part of. I know what it's like to make impossible shots while men are dying around me. I know what it's like to fight for people who don't even want me there. She stood, weapons still aimed. You had everything. Trust, position, brothers who would have died for you, and you threw it all away because you were afraid. Military police arrived then, sirens and flashlights converging on the motor pool. Pierce was with them, along with Ava and a squad of armed personnel. Take him, Elle said, stepping back. They hauled Crane to his feet. As they dragged him away, he looked back at Elle one final time. Who are you? He asked. Who the hell are you? Elle's voice was quiet, final. The girl you tried to get killed, the one who came back anyway. The debriefing took 3 hours. Elle sat in a hard metal chair, answering questions from intelligence officers she'd never met. Legal representatives who looked at her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Commanding officers whose names she would forget before the day was over. Her arm had finally been bandaged. Someone had given her coffee she didn't taste. The adrenaline had burned off an hour ago, leaving her hollow and shaking, running on nothing but will. Crane talked. Once he started, he couldn't stop. The whole sordid story came spilling out like poison from an infected wound. Gambling debts accumulated over years. Threats that started small and grew. Escalating demands. The slow slide from small compromises to outright treason. He'd been feeding them information for 2 years. Ava Sterling discovered during her deep dive through archived operations. Tonight wasn't the first time Crane had compromised a mission, just the biggest. How many others died because of him? Elle asked when they finally let her leave. Ava stood in the corridor outside the briefing room. Her face showed the weight of what she'd learned. What she'd discovered buried in files that should have been examined more closely years ago. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. "Thorne's out of surgery," Ava said instead, changing the subject to something neither of them wanted to think about too deeply. "They saved his leg. He's going to make it." Elle closed her eyes. For a moment she let herself feel the relief. The weight that had been pressing on her chest since the helicopter ride back eased slightly. "Thank you for telling me. You should go see him. When he wakes up," Ava paused. "He's been asking about you." "Has he?" "Every time he surfaces, first thing out of his mouth." Ava managed a tired smile. "I think you made an impression." Elle walked to the medical unit as dawn was breaking over the desert. The sky was turning from black to gray to gold, painting the sand in colors that seemed too beautiful for a day that had started with so much death. Thorne was in a private room. Machines beeped softly. IV lines ran into his arm. He looked small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way that warriors should never look. But he was breathing. His chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. Walsh sat beside him. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours. Probably hadn't. His eyes were red, but dry now. "How is he?" Elle asked from the doorway. Walsh looked up. "They say he'll walk again. Might take months of rehab, but he'll walk." He gestured to the other chair. "Come in. He'd want you here." Elle moved into the room, sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the base was waking up. Soldiers moving to breakfast. The day shift taking over from night watch. Life continuing like the world hadn't almost ended. "He woke up about an hour ago," Walsh said quietly. "Asked about you. Wanted me to give you a message." "What message?" Walsh's voice was rough. "He said he was wrong about everything. He said you're not the kid he thought you were." He paused. "He said you're the best damn sniper he's ever seen, and he's seen a lot." Elle didn't know how to respond to that. She sat in the hospital chair, looking at the man who'd mocked her, tormented her, tried to drive her away. The man whose life she'd saved. "Tell him we're even," she said finally. "He doubted me. I proved him wrong. That's all there is to it." "That's not all there is to it." Walsh leaned forward. "He's going to be different when he wakes up. What happened out there, what you did, it changed him. It changed all of us. People don't change that easily. Some do, when they're forced to see the truth about themselves." Walsh looked at her directly. "For what it's worth, I believed in you. From the first time I watched you clean that rifle, I knew you were something special. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? Would any of them have listened?" Elle considered the question. "No, probably not. Then I figured I'd let you prove it yourself." Walsh managed a tired smile. "And you did. 3,218 meters. In the dark. With wind. That's going to be a legend. You know that, right? They'll be telling that story for decades." "I don't want to be a legend." "Too late. You already are." Admiral Garrett Mackenzie arrived at 0600 hours with the sunrise at his back. Elle was sitting alone on the steps of the operations center, watching the light change when she heard the helicopter. She knew it was him before the bird touched down. Some part of her had been waiting for this moment since she'd made the shot, since she'd done the thing he'd trained her whole life to do. The helicopter landed in a storm of dust and noise. The door opened, and her father stepped out. 64 years old, silver hair cut military short, face weathered by decades of service. He wore his dress uniform, every medal, every decoration, every symbol of a career that had shaped modern special operations. Behind him came 3 generals, 2 Army, 1 Air Force, all of them watching Elle with expressions she couldn't read. And behind them, it seemed like half the base had found reasons to be nearby. Operators lined the edges of the landing pad, support personnel, everyone who'd heard the story, everyone who wanted to see what happened next. Pierce stepped forward to meet them. His uniform was fresh, but his face still showed the exhaustion of the previous night, the near death that had come so close. Admiral Mackenzie, welcome to FOB Sentinel. Commander Pierce, her father's voice was deep, commanding, exactly as Elle remembered from every briefing, every training session, every moment of her life. I've read your report, all of it. Sir, I want to personally apologize for how your daughter was treated when she arrived. If you had known, you would have treated her differently. Her father's voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. That's precisely why you weren't told. She needed to prove herself without my shadow hanging over her. He looked past Pierce, found Elle sitting on the steps. She did. Elle stood, walked forward, stopped at attention in front of her father. Every eye on the base was watching them now, watching the moment between the legend and the daughter he'd forged into something that shouldn't exist. Admiral, she said. Her voice was formal, correct. The voice she used when they were in public, and he was her commanding officer instead of her father. Staff Sergeant, his voice was cold, professional, the voice of authority. But then his face cracked, just slightly, a softening around the eyes that only Elle would recognize, a warmth that broke through the military bearing. You scared the hell out of me, he said quietly. I learned from the best, sir. Her father laughed, actually laughed. The sound seemed to release something in the assembled crowd. Officers relaxed. Operators exchanged glances. The tension that had been building broke like a wave against rocks. 3,218 meters, her father said, turning to address everyone, making sure his voice carried. Night conditions, crosswind, moving to a position no one else would attempt, taking a shot no one else could make. He paused, let the weight of those words settle, and then pursuing a traitor single-handedly, apprehending him before he could escape. All of this after being dismissed, after being told to stand down, after being treated like she didn't belong. He looked at Pierce. His voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. Commander, you had a weapon under your command that you didn't recognize. That's not entirely your fault. My daughter was designed to be underestimated. It's part of her tactical advantage. Design, sir? I've been training her since she was 5 years old. Her father's voice carried no apology, no regret. After her mother died, I didn't know how to be a parent. I only knew how to be a warrior, so I raised her as one. He turned back to the assembled crowd. Every range session, every tactical exercise, every simulation my teams used to train the best operators in the world. Elle did them all. Not once, thousands of times. She's not just a talented shooter. She's the most extensively trained precision marksman I've ever produced. And I've produced quite a few. Silence. Every person present stared at Elle with new eyes, seeing her not as the girl who'd arrived 3 days ago, but as something else entirely. A weapon, a warrior. A culmination of decades of knowledge poured into a single person. One of the generals stepped forward, 3 stars on his collar, face carved from granite. Staff Sergeant Mackenzie, you've been recommended for immediate assignment to DevGru. The recommendation came from Commander Pierce and was endorsed unanimously by every operator who served with you last night. Elle's breath caught. DEVGRU. The Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the most elite tier of special operations in the world, the level that even most SEALs never reached. Sir, I'm 28. Assignment would begin immediately. You've more than proven you're ready. Elle looked at her father. He nodded slightly. Permission, acknowledgement, pride. Elle started, stopped. Her mind was racing through possibilities, through everything this meant, the life she could have, the warrior she could become, and the price she'd already paid. The exhaustion that went deeper than physical, the shaking in her hands that wouldn't stop, the way she'd almost frozen on the ridge before taking the shot, the fear that had clawed at her throat even as her training took over. I accept, she heard herself say. Thank you, sir. The area erupted. Operators crowded forward to congratulate her. Pierce shook her hand again, his grip firm. Walsh pulled her into a hug that lifted her off the ground. Even the generals were smiling now. But through it all, Elle's eyes found her father's. He nodded once, a private acknowledgement. A father's pride expressed in the only language he knew. She nodded back. 2 hours later, Elle sat beside Thorne's hospital bed. The senior chief was awake now, propped against pillows. His face had more color, but pain lined his features with every breath. "So," he said when she walked in. His voice was weak but present. "DEVGRU. Word travels fast. This is a military base. Word travels at the speed of gossip, which is faster than light." He shifted, wincing. "You deserve it. I mean that." "You don't have to." "Yeah, I do." He cut her off. "I was an ass to you from minute one. I saw a young woman and decided you were worthless. Didn't matter what you could do. Didn't matter what you proved. I'd already made up my mind." Elle sat in the chair Walsh had occupied earlier. "You weren't the only one." "No, but I was the loudest." Thorne's eyes met hers. "I've been doing this job for 18 years. I thought I knew what a warrior looked like. Big, strong, male, experienced." He shook his head slightly. "You're none of those things, and you outperformed every operator I've ever served with. I had good training. Training doesn't explain what you did. I've seen trained shooters freeze under pressure. I've seen experienced operators miss shots half that distance because their hands were shaking." His voice grew harder. "You didn't freeze. You didn't shake. You climbed a mountain alone in enemy territory and took a shot that saved my life." Elle didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to praise from a man who'd spent days trying to destroy her. "I'm going to ask you something," Thorne continued, "and I want an honest answer. Okay? When you took that shot, the one that killed the SAM operator, what were you thinking?" Elle considered the question, remembered the moment, the stillness, the absolute clarity. "I was thinking about the math, wind speed, bullet drop, time of flight. That's it, just math." "That's it? And," Elle paused, "Walsh told me about his daughter, the one he lost, and I thought, if I missed that shot, if the helicopters couldn't reach you, his story would end there, in a valley, surrounded by people who wanted him dead." She met Thorne's eyes. "I thought about all the stories that would end if I failed, all the families that would get phone calls, all the daughters who wouldn't see their fathers again." Thorne was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "When I was hit, when I felt the blood and knew I was dying, do you know what I thought about?" Elle shook her head. "My daughter, Bryn. She's 7 years old, loves unicorns and refuses to eat vegetables." His voice cracked slightly. "I thought about how I'd never see her grow up, never walk her down the aisle, never meet my grandchildren, all because I'd bled out in some godforsaken valley on the other side of the world." He looked at Elle directly. "You gave me that back. All of it, because you didn't miss." "Senior Chief." "Nathan," he managed a weak smile. "After everything, I think you've earned the right to use my first name." "Nathan," Elle tested the word. "I didn't do it for gratitude." "I know, that's why it matters." He extended his hand. "Thank you, Elle, for my life, for my future, for everything I'll get to do because you were there when I needed saving." She took his hand, held it. "You're welcome." The new mission briefing happened at 1400 hours. Elle walked into the operations center expecting resistance, expecting questions, expecting the same doubt she'd faced 3 days ago. Instead, she found acceptance. Pierce stood at the front, tactical displays showing a new compound, different location, same target. "Intel has located Malik Hassan," he began, "the same target we were supposed to eliminate before the ambush. He's moved to a secondary compound, heavily fortified, better defended. He knows we're coming." "He knows we failed the first time," Walsh said. "He doesn't know we're coming back." Pierce pulled up satellite imagery. "This time we do it right. Full team. Air support confirmed. Overwatch position. He looked directly at Elle. That's yours, Mackenzie. The room stirred. Overwatch was typically the senior sniper's role, Thorne's role when he was healthy. Now it was being given to the woman who'd been on base for less than a week. One of the operators spoke up. Dex Lawson, his shoulder still bandaged from the previous night. Sir, no disrespect to Mackenzie, but she's only been on one mission. Senior Overwatch on a high-value target operation. Mackenzie made a 3,200 18-meter shot under combat conditions that saved this entire team, Pierce responded. His voice was calm but firm. She exposed a traitor who had been feeding our operations to the enemy for 2 years. She has more combat experience in the last 72 hours than most operators get in their first deployment. He paused, looked around the room. Any other objections? Silence. Good. Callahan, you'll position here. He pointed to a ridge overlooking the target compound. Elevation advantage, clear sightlines, covered approach. You'll be our eyes and our insurance. Elle studied the position, the angles, the distances, already calculating what she'd need. What about extraction? Helicopter support will be on station throughout the operation. The moment we have confirmation of target elimination, birds come in for pickup. And if something goes wrong, Pierce met her eyes. Then you do what you did last time. You adapt. You overcome. You bring everyone home. The weight of his trust settled on Elle's shoulders. 3 days ago, this man had dismissed her as a liability. Now he was putting the lives of his entire team in her hands. Understood, sir. Elle visited Thorne one more time before the mission. Found him in physical therapy, working with a trainer, trying to take steps on his wounded leg. Sweat poured down his face. His jaw was clenched against pain he refused to acknowledge. Looking good, Senior Chief, she said from the doorway. Thorne glanced up. Liar. He took another step, grimacing. But I appreciate the sentiment. I heard about the mission tomorrow. Yeah. He paused his exercise, grabbed a towel. You're taking Overwatch. That's my position. Was your position. Was. Thorne limped toward her, waving off the trainer's attempt to help. I'm out for at least 6 months, probably longer. Someone has to fill the gap. I'm not trying to replace you. I know. He stopped in front of her. That's why I asked Pierce to give you the role. Elle stared at him. You asked? Don't act so surprised. I'm an ass, not an idiot. Thorne's expression was serious. You're better than me, Elle. That shot you made, I couldn't have done it, not in those conditions, not at that range. Maybe on my best day, with perfect weather and all the time in the world. Maybe. But you did it when it mattered, when everything was falling apart and men were dying. I was lucky. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Your father taught me that. His voice softened. He called me this morning, told me the full story, how he trained you, why he kept it secret, and I understand now, why you are the way you are, why you don't react when people doubt you. He paused. You've been doubted your whole life, by everyone except him. You've learned to let results speak for themselves. Results are all that matter. No, Thorne shook his head. People matter, the men you save, the families who get their fathers back, the children who grow up with parents because someone was good enough and brave enough to make the impossible shot. He extended his hand. Thank you, Elle, for my life, for my future, for everything I'll get to do because you were there when I needed saving. She shook his hand. Just doing my job. Your job saved 8 lives. Thorne squeezed her hand before releasing it. Now go save more. That's an order. The helicopters lifted off at 0400 hours. Elle sat in the lead aircraft, rifle case between her knees, watching the faces of the men around her. They were different now. The hostility was gone. The doubt was gone. In its place was something she'd never expected to see directed at her. Trust. Walsh caught her eye and nodded. Pierce was reviewing tactical displays, but he glanced up long enough to give her a thumbs up. Even the operators who had been most skeptical now looked at her like she was one of them. Because she was. Finally, completely. The flight took 40 minutes. Elle used the time to review her calculations one more time. The overwatch position Pierce had assigned offered excellent sight lines, but limited escape routes. If things went wrong, she'd be exposed. She didn't care. She'd been exposed before. She'd survived before. She would survive again. The helicopter touched down 3 kilometers from the target compound. Elle was first out, moving toward her position while the team assembled for their approach. Whisper, radio check. Pierce's voice in her ear. Whisper copies, moving to overwatch. Good hunting. The climb to her position took 20 minutes. By the time she reached the ridge, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. The assault would begin with first light. Elle set up her rifle with practiced efficiency. The compound spread out below her. Guards on the walls, vehicles in the courtyard, movement in the windows. Hassan was there, she could feel it. Whisper in position. I have eyes on target compound, counting 12 hostiles visible, probably more inside. Copy, Whisper. We're beginning approach. She watched through her scope as the team moved through the valley. Shadows among shadows. They were good, the best. But even the best could be surprised. Whisper, I've got movement on the north wall. Single hostile, elevated position. I see him. Elle adjusted her aim. The guard was scanning the valley, unaware that death was watching from a kilometer away. He hasn't spotted you. Continue approach. Copy. The team reached the outer perimeter. Breaching charges placed. Timers set. Everyone in position. 30 seconds to breach, Pierce reported. Elle's finger rested on the trigger. The guard on the north wall had turned, looking in the wrong direction. Perfect. 20 seconds. She controlled her breathing. Slow, steady, the familiar calm settling over her like a second skin. 10 seconds. The guard turned again. His eyes swept across the valley. Stopped. He'd seen something. Contact! Elle's voice was sharp. North wall guard is alerting, taking the shot. She fired. The guard dropped before he could raise an alarm. Threat neutralized. Continue breach. The charges detonated. The team poured through the walls. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Elle worked her rifle with mechanical precision. A fighter emerging from a doorway. Down. Another one trying to flank the team from the west. Down. A third raising an RPG toward the assault force. Down. Multiple hostiles exiting the main building. Walsh's voice was tight. I see them. Elle shifted her aim. 5 fighters running toward defensive positions. She fired 5 times. 5 fighters fell. Jesus, someone breathed over the radio. She's not missing. Focus on your sector, Pierce said. Whisper, any sign of the primary target? Negative, he's not visible from my position. Copy, we're entering the main building. Elle watched helplessly as the team disappeared inside. She could hear the gunfire through the radio. Shouts, explosions, the chaos of close-quarters combat. Contact in the central room. Grenade, get down. Man down. Lawson's hit. Elle's heart hammered. She couldn't help them in there, couldn't protect them when the walls blocked her view. Whisper, we've located the target. Hassan is in the basement. We're pursuing. Copy, Viper. I'm watching the exits. The compound's rear door burst open. 3 figures emerged, running toward a vehicle parked near the back wall. One of them was taller than the others, older, moving with the authority of command. Target is exiting through the rear, Elle shouted. 3 hostiles moving toward vehicle. I have the shot. Take it! Elle aimed. The target was 800 meters away, moving fast, surrounded by bodyguards. She fired. The first bodyguard dropped. She worked the bolt, fired again. The second bodyguard fell. Hassan threw himself behind the vehicle. She couldn't see him now, couldn't get a clean shot. Target is using vehicle for cover. I don't have an angle. Can Can you disable the vehicle? Already on it. Elle put a round through the engine block, then another through the front tire. The vehicle wasn't going anywhere, but Hassan was still hidden, still alive. Viper, I need you to flush him out. I can't see him behind that vehicle. We're pinned in the basement, taking fire from multiple directions. Elle made a decision. A crazy, reckless, completely unreasonable decision. I'm repositioning. Whisper, negative, hold your position. She was already moving, grabbing her rifle, sliding down the ridge, running toward the compound. 800 meters of open ground between her and the target. Whisper, what the hell are you doing? My job, Commander. She ran. Bullets cracked around her. Someone had spotted her, was trying to bring her down. She didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept moving, closing the distance. 600 meters, 400, 200. She dropped behind a wall, breathing hard. From here, she could see around the vehicle. Hassan was crouched behind the rear wheel, a pistol in his hand, eyes wild with fear. He saw her. Their eyes met across 50 meters of dusty courtyard. Elle raised her rifle. Hassan raised his pistol. She was faster. The rifle kicked. Hassan jerked backward. The pistol fell from his fingers. He slumped against the vehicle and didn't move. Target down, Elle reported. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Malik Hassan is eliminated. Silence on the radio. Then Pierce's voice, filled with something that sounded like awe. Copy, Whisper. Target confirmed down. All units prepare for extraction. The helicopters arrived 12 minutes later. The team emerged from the compound, some walking, others being carried. Lawson had taken a round in the shoulder but would survive. 2 others had minor wounds. Everyone was coming home. Pierce found Elle sitting against the wall where she'd taken the final shot. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You disobeyed a direct order, he said. Yes, sir. You left your overwatch position without authorization. Yes, sir. You crossed 800 meters of open ground under enemy fire. Yes, sir. Pierce crouched beside her. You also saved this entire operation. Hassan was 30 seconds from escaping. If he'd gotten away, we'd have lost him for months, maybe years. I saw an opportunity. I took it. That's not what you did. Pierce's voice was quiet. You saw your team in trouble. You saw a target escaping. And you decided that following orders mattered less than completing the mission and protecting your people. Elle looked at him. Are you going to court-martial me? Pierce laughed. Actually laughed. Court-martial you, Mackenzie? I'm going to recommend you for a Bronze Star. He stood, offered his hand. Welcome to the team, officially, permanently. You're one of us now. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You earned this. That night, Admiral Mackenzie requested a private dinner with Elle. They sat across from each other in his temporary quarters, military issue plates between them, years of complicated history filling the silence. You did good, her father said finally. I followed my training. You exceeded it. He set down his fork. That shot wasn't in any training scenario I ever designed. The variables were beyond anything we practiced. Then how did I make it? Because you're not just trained, Elle. You're gifted. There's something in you that goes beyond practice and preparation. A stillness, an instinct. He paused. Your mother had it too. Elle stiffened. Mom? She was a competitive shooter before we met. Olympic qualifier. Would have made the team if she hadn't gotten pregnant with you. Her father's eyes grew distant. She gave that up for me, for us. Said a family was worth more than a gold medal. I never knew. There's a lot you don't know about her. I've been saving it, waiting until you were ready. He reached into his pocket, withdrew a small box, pushed it across the table. She asked me to give you this on your 28th birthday. I think you've earned it now. Elle opened the box. Inside was a medal, an Olympic qualifier's pin from 28 years ago. The medal was tarnished but still beautiful. She wanted you to know where your talent came from, her father said quietly. Not from me, from her. The steady hands, the still mind, the ability to focus so completely that the world disappears. That's her gift to you. Elle held the pin, felt its weight, understood what it meant. Her mother hadn't just died and left her with grief. She'd left her with a legacy, a piece of herself that lived on in Elle's abilities. I wish I could have known her, Elle whispered. The real her, not just the sick version at the end. She knew you'd say that. Her father's voice was rough. She told me once, near the end, that her only regret was that you'd remember her weak. She wanted you to know she was strong once, that she fought every day to live long enough to see you grow up. He paused. She wanted you to know that the fight in you came from her too. Elle closed her eyes. Tears fell freely now. For the mother she'd lost, for the warrior she'd become, for the connection she'd never known existed. Dad, the word felt strange. She hadn't called him that in years, not since she was small, since before the training consumed everything, since before he became admiral and she became soldier. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you weren't ready. You needed to find your own strength first, to become the warrior on your own terms. He reached across the table, took her hand. Now you have, and now you can carry her with you into every battle, into every moment. She's part of you, Elle, the best part. They sat together in silence, father and daughter, connected by grief and pride, and the ghost of a woman who had left pieces of herself in both of them. Later, much later, Elle walked alone to the range. It was 0300 hours. The base was quiet. Most personnel were asleep. In a few hours, the sun would rise and everything would start again. But Elle needed this, needed to clear her head, needed to process everything that had happened. She set up at the firing line, began methodically putting rounds through targets she could barely see in the darkness. Each shot perfect. Each impact exactly where she intended. Pierce found her there an hour later. He'd been unable to sleep too. The weight of command, the decisions made, the lives saved and the lives that could have been lost. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much to think about. Mind if I watch? Elle shrugged. Pierce leaned against the range barrier as she continued firing, shot after shot, each one perfect. I've been going over your file, he said after a while. The unredacted version. Your father gave me access. Elle lowered her rifle, looked at him. And? You've been doing this since you were 5. Training, shooting, studying tactics and strategy while other kids were learning to read. Reading came first, actually. My father insisted on literacy before firearms. Pierce almost smiled. The point is, you gave up your childhood for this. Every normal experience, every ordinary moment. You sacrificed all of it to become what you are. Is there a question in there somewhere? Was it worth it? Elle considered the question, looked out at the targets, at the evidence of what she could do, what she'd become. Ask Thorne if it was worth it. Ask Walsh. Ask every man who came home last night instead of going home in a box. I'm asking you. I never had a normal childhood. I don't know what I gave up because I never had it to lose. All I know is what I gained. She met his eyes. The ability to make a difference. The skill to save lives when saving lives seems impossible. She paused. Last night, 8 men went home to their families because I existed, because my father trained me, because I was exactly what I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be it. She lifted her rifle again. So, yes, Commander, it was worth it. Pierce watched her fire 3 more rounds. 3 hits so close together, they formed a single, ragged hole in the target. You know what the team is calling you? He asked. I've heard rumors. Whisper, because by the time you hear the shot, it's already over. Elle smiled slightly. I like it. It suits you. Pierce straightened. Get some rest, Whisper. We've got work to do. And this time, you're going to be part of the planning from the start, not watching from the back of the room. Yes, sir. Pierce walked away, leaving her alone with her rifle and her thoughts. Elle fired one more round, watched it strike the center of a target she could barely see in the darkness. Whisper. She could live with that. The final briefing happened 3 days later. Elle stood at the front of the room this time, not in the back. Not dismissed, part of the team. Pierce outlined their next operations. 6 more targets in Hassan's network, each one a piece of the puzzle, each one bringing them closer to dismantling the entire organization. Whisper will be lead overwatch on all of them, Pierce said. He looked around the room. Any objections? Silence. No one questioned it now. No one doubted. They'd seen what she could do. They'd lived because of what she could do. Elle studied the imagery, already calculating angles and distances, already planning shots that hadn't been asked for yet. Thorne watched from his wheelchair at the edge of the room. He caught her eye, nodded once. Approval, respect, more than that, pride. The kind a teacher feels when a student surpasses them. Elle nodded back. That night she sat in her quarters and wrote one final letter. To her father, to herself, to the memory of a mother she barely remembered but carried with her every day. Dad, the mission was successful. Hassan is eliminated. Everyone came home. I made shots I wasn't sure I could make. I took risks I probably shouldn't have taken. But when it mattered, when everything was on the line, I did what you trained me to do. I was the warrior you made me. And I finally understand why you did it. Not because you didn't know how to be a father, because you knew exactly what kind of world I would face. A world that would doubt me, dismiss me, tell me I couldn't do what needed to be done. You prepared me for that world. You gave me the tools to prove them all wrong. Mom's medal is around my neck as I write this. I can feel her with me, her steadiness, her focus, her refusal to give up even when everything said she should. I'm going to DevGru. I'm going to become the best operator they've ever seen. And every time I take a shot, every time I save a life, I'm going to carry both of you with me. Thank you for everything. Your daughter, your warrior, Elle. She sealed the letter, placed it with the others she would send tomorrow. Then she picked up her rifle and began the familiar routine of cleaning and maintenance. The same motions she'd performed thousands of times. The same ritual that connected her to every moment of her training, every lesson her father had taught, every sacrifice that had brought her to this point. Outside, the base continued its rhythms. Soldiers walked past her quarters, some of them whispering her new call sign with something like reverence. Whisper, the girl who came from nowhere. The 28-year-old who made impossible shots. The warrior who saved 8 lives and caught a traitor and killed a warlord and proved every doubter wrong. She was all of those things now, and she was just getting started. Elle finished cleaning her rifle, held it up to the light. Perfect. Ready. Just like her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to prove that age and gender and assumption meant nothing compared to skill and courage, and the willingness to step forward when stepping forward was needed. She was ready for all of it, because she wasn't just Elle Mackenzie anymore. She wasn't just the admiral's daughter, or the technical specialist, or the kid nobody believed in. She was Whisper, and this was only the beginning.